2025 is in the rearview mirror. We're now moving into 2026. What will happen in 2026? What were the big stories of 2025 on this slice of fresh bread? Welcome to Fresh Bread, a podcast ministry of Grace Bible Church, Gainesville, with Pastor Brandon and Pastor Keith. Well, thanks for clicking on Fresh Bread. Fresh Bread, where we're bringing the truth of God's Word to a starving world. Fresh Bread Podcast 132, and the end of a year, the beginning of a new year. I guess it's kind of an exciting thing because it's like a reset, most people think. You make all these resolutions, you're going to lose weight, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And so what we thought we'd do here on Fresh Bread is we would kind of just go over some of the things that happened last year, 2025, and then we're not prophets, but we're just going to throw some things out that we feel may happen in 2026. So I'm Pastor Keith, he's Pastor Brandon. Pastor Brandon, did you have a good 2025?
Personally, yeah. I mean, it was challenging at times, but yeah, it was a good time. I mean, it was, for the most part, family, a lot of stuff happening with the family, and my daughter got married, and there was, we took a few trips, went out, out of country for one, and you were able to go on a cruise or two during the year. And so we've had a good time that way. And, there's challenges we have, but overall, I would say it was a good year.
Have you ever had a bad year?
Oh, I'm sure I have.
I think you mentioned 1978. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. I mean, my hardest years were probably in college and, when I got my bachelor's degree, and then the first 3 or 4 years after college were very difficult. Those years were difficult for me, as you transition, from being a young person to older and being, going through that stage of maturing. Those were difficult times for me.
But is it true that sometimes as we look back, those hard days were actually kind of fond, like we're fond of those struggles sometimes more than... I've heard people say that people who are rich and have made it to the top, they look back at the struggle to climb that, to get where they were those were some of the best years, even though they were struggling. They wish they could go back and redo.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I do know that there was a necessity of going through the things that I went through when I was younger. I do know that. I wouldn't want to go back to those days. Like, it's not, I mean, they were that difficult. I wouldn't want to go back to them. Part of it was because I just didn't know Christ. And so, I was living as an unbeliever, and there was I struggled with a lot of anxiety and a lot of mental stuff going on that, was due to my sin and holding on to my sin. And so, it took coming to know Christ before I could really begin, being healed of those things and, through Christ and with the Holy Spirit dwelling in me. So no, I wouldn't go back to those things, although I do see the necessity of what the Lord did in that. And so, but even as a Christian, I would, looking back at difficult times, and, going through seminary was a difficult time, for both of us, and for different reasons, but it was a difficult time. And yet I do see the Lord's hand, and I do see that it was a good struggle. So.
Yeah, it's kind of like we're to live for the day that we are in, but we sometimes tend to look back and say, boy, if I could just go back and be in high school again and relive all those years, or go back to college, relive those years. We forget about there are some heartaches and things that we wouldn't want to go through again, but you have to go through them again. But you kind of put those off to the side and you think about all the fun stuff that you would have done because you were young and you could run and do all the stuff, play sports and, do all the stuff that you want to do. But I think we need to live in where we are now because this is where the Lord has us. And going through all that, like you said, all your struggles, it was good for you to go through them because it makes you the person you are. I'm sitting with right now.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I wouldn't be the person I am. Not that I'm much, but anything there is, because the Lord has worked in me and, put me through trials and difficulties and learning how to consider it all joy when you encounter those things, and that understanding what the Lord is doing with those difficulties. And So I'm not a guy that looks back on my life and wish that I could go back. Like I'm thinking that I could do something better. I probably could if I know what I know now. But and I definitely live it differently than I did then. But I don't sit back and think, oh wow, I wished I could go back. It is what it is, and I'm living for today and an eternity. So
yeah, I've watched enough Twilight Zones to know that you can't go back, and if you go back and try to relive it, things are going to be different, and nothing's going to work out the way you expect them to.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's like the Twilight Zone always had those where the guy dreamed to go back to being a kid, and then he'd right all the wrongs that he did, but then he ended up messing everything up, and he ended up in a different in a worse situation. So we can't do that. But anyway, we're talking about the year 2025, 2026, and those were good years, and hopefully it will be good in 2026. 2025 was, every year has its challenges, and we don't know. Like, you always start out the year like, I wonder what this year's going to be. And it just seems to go by so fast, but yet there's a lot of things that happen in there. So I thought we'd just go over some of the top stories of 2025 before we jump into what we think is going to happen in 2026. So I just jotted some things down. And these are some of the top things that, in my mind, and I'm not talking the world in general, but these are just stories that I feel were big that happened. So I'll start with my number 5. This is my number 5 top story. I think Mamdani, who is a socialist communist, was elected mayor of New York City. To me, that's my 5th top story of 2025. That is, never thought I'd see that in my lifetime as a kid growing up.
It's funny you're not even mentioning the fact that he was sworn in on a Quran.
Oh, he was. I don't even pay attention to him, but he's kind of a fruitcake.
I just saw the headline, but I think he was just sworn in. So I just saw the headline. Yes, he was sworn in on a Quran. So I think the bigger issue is the rise of Muslim, influence in those big cities such as New York.
Yeah, and I think that's why it's one of my top stories. Is I look at my old home state of Minnesota is full of corruption, where you have Somali people who are Muslim, and they're just taking all the money they can, and they're changing a lot of everything into Sharia law and all this stuff. So you're right. I mean, this is I think what we might be talking about a year from now. This may be the big story of Islam kind of just taking over the United States and maybe the world.
Yeah, I think it's a bigger story than people give it credit for. I just think that what we have to recognize is that we're either going to be a Muslim nation or we're going to be a Christian nation. I don't think we can be a secular nation, because secular ideology is not robust enough to proliferate or to basically hold the thought life of Americans. I mean, basically be who we're going to be morally. And so I think we're either going to be a Christian nation or a Muslim nation. And what we're seeing with the rise of Islam in the United States, in the West, ultimately it's also happening in Europe. But I think we're seeing a huge threat that's coming. And some people would say it's already here.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I've heard you talk many times about Barack Obama when he was president and how that affected our country more than I think we realize. But his motto or his slogan was change, right? That's kind of what he was coming in with. And it's interesting that I was just watched this video on this guy talking about the NFL. They have a new slogan, which is inspire change. And it's interesting when you just bring that up. It's interesting how we look at the Donald Trump, and it's kind of like the mega group is wanting to go back to the way things were, common sense, and you look at the other side and we have change, inspire change to what? Well, they want to change everything from the way it was to a different way, but is that different way better than the old way? And we kind of look at it as Christian values, as we're not Christian nationalists, but we do believe in that the Christian way of life is the better way than an Islamic way of life or any other way of life, without like a kind of a worldview, personal, selfish worldview is kind of the way the world's going. But we think of a God-centered worldview as the better way to live.
Well, sure. I mean, a biblical worldview is the way to live. It's the only way to live, ultimately. I mean, obviously you can live other ways, but you're not going to ultimately flourish if you live other ways. And because God is the one who, all wisdom comes from him. And so, and we find that in the scriptures. But yeah, I mean, you said we're not Christian nationalists. I would not correct you, but I'm not necessarily a Christian nationalist, so to speak. I do believe that we should be a Christian nation and that our laws should be based on basically the commandments and, basically what that entails. And I don't think that I don't think we can be a secular nation. I don't think it will work because, secularism it's death. I mean, that's what they want is death. And, whether it's killing old people or whether it's killing people who are sick or whether it's killing babies in the womb, they want death. And I just don't think it just can't happen long term. Like it can proliferate short term, and it has, but long term, it basically will kill itself.
Right. And what I meant by that is I don't think I'm in the same camp you are, but when you think of the word Christian nationalist, you think of like a neo-Nazi kind of white supremacist. Yeah. And that's not what, we're not that, but.
No, that's kind of they're terming it now like woke right, or the alt right. And, that's not where we're at because we're definitely not Nazism or Hitler or, fascism. That's not who we are. I mean, we're biblical Christians, but we do believe that the law should be based on, the 10 Commandments ultimately. So
absolutely. And that's what I think what we're both saying is that the two worldviews are going to collide and one of them is going to win. They can't both coexist together.
Well, they can't. And secularism can't stand to either one of them. So
yeah,
it's going to be one or the other.
And that's kind of what we're thinking about in 2026 and more of this headbutting going on, more of this conflict. So my fourth top story is Donald Trump takes office on January 20th as the 47th president of the United States. That was quite an upset when that happened.
I don't think it is. I don't think it ultimately ended up being an upset, but it did change. It was interesting that a lot of people in the middle moved toward Donald Trump. And, it also, to me, it put even more doubt when it comes to the 2020 election and how fair that was, or how fair it wasn't. But, I think that in a fair election, I think he would have won 2020. And I think a lot of the things that happened in 2020 were fixed in 24 in terms of the voting, and they weren't able to get away with what they did in 2020. That's my opinion. I know a lot of people still think that's conspiracy theory, but I don't think so. I think it's pretty much proven fact at this point that it for sure Georgia was stolen. That's been proven. But I think the other swing states that went toward Biden were stolen as well. And so it is a huge story that Trump was elected in 2024.
Yeah. I mean, that was one of my few predictions that I thought he would win in a landslide. And he pretty much, won pretty big, but it was stunning. I mean, they tried to assassinate him, tried to put him in jail, and yet he still ends up becoming the 47th.
Well, you could argue that that's partially what put him in the office. So
yeah, maybe
they tried to jail him. They tried to, they convicted him. All these things, they tried to kill him with a bullet, two assassins actually. Yeah, I mean, it's clear that I think that's what swung in his direction. I mean, there's also the influence of social media and podcasting. I mean, so Joe Rogan, I think, was a big part of that as well. Charlie Kirk was a big part of it and his influence when he was living at that point. And so, yeah, I mean, yeah, it was a big story. It was a huge story, and for a lot of different reasons.
Yeah, my third one is that Trump orders crackdown on illegal immigration, deports thugs and criminals here illegally. That was my third top story. Something that I don't think any of us thought would actually really happen. So I would, yeah.
Well, he definitely promised it. I mean,
He
promised
did.
that was one of his platform. That's one of the things he ran on, was he was going to fix immigration, and it's been stunning how quickly he stopped the flow, which to me goes to show that ultimately the Democrats, especially under the Biden administration, they weren't trying. They weren't trying to stop the flow. They were actually encouraging people to flow in here, and I would argue it's because they hate the country. They don't like or love the United States of America as it stands. They want something. I think it's probably, well, I shouldn't say probably. I'm fairly certain that it's, they want to go one world government, and in order to do that, a strong country like the United States has to fall. And I think that's what they were trying to do, is bring us down to the rest of the world.
Yeah. So as we begin 2026, do you think we're going to make it to the 250th anniversary? July 4th will be the 250th birthday. Are we
this year?
Yeah, this is the 250.
Yeah, we'll make it.
We make it to 260.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, that once you get out past a decade, that's going to be hard. That's hard to say. I mean, you just don't know. I mean, who knows what? I know that we have some weaknesses that we don't realize. And, I think that militarily, I mean, I don't know about militarily, but I think the biggest weakness we have is our culture is going downhill. And there's so much division that I don't know how we would ever be able to pull together to be able to protect against a common enemy. Possibly, you would hope we would, but it would be hard. And so, I mean, I see us failing from within before we would ever be conquered from outside. But who knows? I mean, we with the way warfare has changed, and with now the drone technology that's out there, these drone wars that are there, are we? I don't think we're certainly not ahead in that way, from what I can understand. I think China is way ahead in terms of the drones. So, we may be in for a world of hurt. Similar to, after World War One, France and them, they really, to protect against that happening again, they put all these defense works in, and then Hitler just went over and around them and didn't even slow down. It didn't even check him up at all. And so, that's the same kind of thing I wonder with us. Now, obviously there's more that we have more than we know in terms of our abilities. They don't advertise everything we can do, but I just not worry, but I am concerned that potentially somebody could get better than us militarily without us knowing it, really, until we're tested.
How do you feel about I just heard they're going to use drones now to patrol, the freeways. Instead of having like state troopers, they're going to be more drones that'll be checking speed and giving tickets.
I haven't heard that, but that does make sense that they would do it. I don't like it because it's, I mean, I think that you're getting closer and closer to a true police state, where your every movement is going to be tracked. And I'm not a big fan of that. And so, yeah, I'm not a fan.
Isn't it incredible how everything that the Bible talked about is all falling into place? Like all this AI and drone technology is it is getting to the point where they can almost control everything and see everything we're doing.
It is getting close.
That's amazing.
I mean, if we go to a cashless society, you won't be able to, you won't be able to buy and trade, without them knowing what's going on, unless you just, we go to a barter system on the side, which I'm sure that's what we would have to do. But yeah, every transaction would be monitored if we go to a cashless society.
Is that the final piece to the puzzle? When that happens, we know that, wow, we're really close.
Yeah. I mean, I would say, obviously the mark of the beast and buying and selling, and, without the mark being impossible. But I think that the technology is pretty close to being able to do whatever that, whatever that is.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, let's look. That was one of the things we should look for either this year, 2026, or 2027, 2028. The cashless, like they're just going to eliminate cash. Everything will be done transactionally, computerized, things like that. So then, and then you got the chip coming, some kind of a chip implanted so that you don't lose your wallet or whatever. So, yeah, that's just amazingly scary to see all that stuff coming.
Yeah.
My second top story is the shootings at Brown University and Bondi Beach massacre. I just have those on because it happened just before Christmas, and it's kind of a sign of, I think, things to come in the next year. We're going to see more and more of these things.
For sure. I mean, I think, the rise of anti-Semitism has been a big story. And you mentioned the Bondi Beach. And so that was definitely an anti-Semitic situation. And we, couple that with the rise of Islam, in our culture, I think we're in for potential for that kind of stuff to continue for sure.
Mostly the Islamic terror attacks are targeted to Jewish people, but do you think that could creep over into them also starting to take out Christians as well?
Well, I for sure. I mean, because ultimately, I mean, the church is an enemy as well. We're not necessarily a blood enemy like the Jewish people, but the church is going to be, I think the church is going to continue to be attacked for sure, whether it's terror attacks or other kinds of attacks. But the church is definitely going to continue to see a rise in those kind of things.
Do you think there'll ever be a day where like Islamic guys or something will run into a church and just cause chaos?
Well, I think it's happening in other places in the world already. So there's no reason to believe that at some point it won't begin to happen here.
Yeah, and that's why we talk about those two world views colliding. One or the other is going to win, and it's very difficult for us here because everything is now you're a racist or you're anti this or anti that. If you say something or you say, hey, I don't think this is a good idea to let them have Sharia law or all this other stuff. Like in Minnesota with the Somali, with all of that corruption, just by even bringing it up now, you are considered racist and you're supposed to keep your mouth shut and not say anything. But then you're opening that crack even bigger and letting more and more bad stuff in. So I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. To me,
that's why I say that the secular worldview can't stand, because there's nothing that stops Islam from running roughshod. And, Sharia law and basically a second law system that basically ends up overcoming our own law system. And so, yeah, I don't think the secular system can stand up to that.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a lack of totally believing Islam, because Islam says that you need to kill the infidel. If you're not a Muslim, you need to be taken out or you need to convert. But I don't know if they understand that if they open this door wider and say, yeah, come on in, all you guys, we can live side by side. I don't understand. It's like, have they ever read Mary Shelley's book, Frankenstein? I mean, you kind of you need more common sense to really see that this isn't a good idea.
Sure. I mean, it's not a good idea because it doesn't play well with others. The Islamic worldview does not play well with others.
Yeah, it'd be like you at a daycare when you were little. So same kind of thing. So anyway, yeah, we have that was a sad story, the Bondi Beach thing going on for Hanukkah, and I think there was 14 dead. So, and my number one story, of course, was the Charlie Kirk assassination. That was a big story. It affected a lot of people, I think, and for good and bad. Some people were celebrating it. Some people were crying. So it was just a big story, I think.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that being that would be one of the biggest stories, but if not the biggest story for sure. It's definitely the one that got most people's attention in 2025. We can probably, I would think that we can see some of that happening going forward. I don't see any reason that it would stop other than, I don't see any reason why it would stop. So yeah, looking forward, I think that we're going to see more of the same.
I don't know if we truly can be aware of the influence that he had on the election with Trump being elected. but I'm sure it was pretty big. And now that he's gone, we talk about midterm elections in 2028. Will that hurt it? It may. I don't know. So maybe Republicans are no longer, like there seems to be a civil war in the Republican Party right now between two different factions, and it could split the party. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm not well versed enough to know for sure. I do know, the sense that I get is that there is a lot of infighting on the Republican side with, the alt-right and woke right. And then you have mainstream Republicans, and it does seem like that there's fractures there, and whether or not will they coalesce around candidates, Republican candidates. I would hope so, but you just never know, because it seems like we have a lot of radical thinking and really on both sides of the aisle, but for sure right now more and more on the Republican side of the aisle.
Yeah, I mean, guys like Tucker Carlson, Israel seems to be the dividing point. If you support Israel, you're on one side, and if you don't, you're on the other. So the Republicans have that wall there between two sides where they used to be united.
Yeah, it's the America First thing.
Yeah.
That's really becoming a big thing. Tucker's pushed that. Nick Fuentes is a big voice for that. And so, they, along with America First, it's America First for everything. And that includes anything with Israel, that you wouldn't help Israel because they don't really care about America. They just care about themselves. That's the attitude. And, and that's, it's definitely problematic, because on the other side, you have a lot of folks that, are still pro-Israel. And so, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it shakes out.
Yeah. And like we always say, we support Israel, but we're not supporting like everything they do, because they do some things wrong, which obviously every nation does. But to me, I'm not worried about the fact that Israel seems to be selfish because I kind of understand their mentality by who do we trust after all the things that have happened to us. Maybe we just need to trust ourselves and get as much help from other people as we can, but not like just be buddies with everybody. That's kind of the way I look at Israel.
Well, the way I look at Israel is that they need to obey the Lord, and they need
right,
to
and they're not
Messiah.
right now. Yeah,
they need to turn to their Messiah. They need to proclaim Christ, and they need Christ. And so I see them evangelistically that way. I don't. I'm obviously not going to curse Israel. But at the end of the day, they need Christ, and we need to make sure that Christ is proclaimed, to them. And that's, we're not, you and I are not in Israel preaching the gospel, but we do need to be preaching the gospel here at home, and basically for everyone, and whether it's Israel or whether it's the United States in terms of who we focus on. But yeah, I mean, Israel is a big question for everyone, and how you respond to Israel. And it's interesting because I think that's the way that the Lord has made it, where, they are going to be a blight, so to speak, on the world. And even though ultimately he's going to get the glory when he restores them, and, there's going to be fights over them, because I think that's part of what he's using. And so it's probably the biggest issue that we face as a country and as the church.
Yeah, and I think everything is falling into place for the end times scenario is that Israel is going to be alone. They're going to be all by themselves. And so I think what they're doing is they're so trusting their own wonderful they have all these they have a good army and a good air force and all these. I think I heard Netanyahu talking about they're going to go into making more weapons and sell them to other places. Like they're going into their self business rather than relying totally on the United States, because they know that's going to fluctuate who is ever in office. And there may even come a day where the United States is just say, look, we're done. We can't do this anymore. So anyway, but I think what they're doing is they're relying on themselves, and then there will come a day where they're going to have to say, look, we need to pray, we need to cry out to the Lord. We can't do this anymore. We are in big trouble. There's going to be so many nations coming against them that they can't do it. They're not going to be able to depend on their technology to save them. So, and you can see all that stuff happening. It's amazing how Israel is a burden stone. Jerusalem is a burden stone to the world. Half the people want Israel done away with, and the other people say, well, let's try to find a place for the Palestinians to live. And so it's just an incredible, just a really thorn in the side to all nations. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. And that, you're speaking politically for the most part, but I think there's a growing divide within the church over Israel. There's a growing number of people who are very vocal, who are basically anti-Israel. And whether they're anti-Semitic or not, I'm sure there are people who are, but definitely a growing divide within the church over how we respond to Israel.
And I think a big part of that is politically because of what they're doing to, Gaza and the children of Gaza and all these things. They're being accused of murdering all these children. And so I think that's where you're seeing churches finally saying, okay, look, we got to stop. Israel's got to stop. We're not going to support them anymore. And again, how do we know what's true? Because there's so much false information. I know Israel has done some bad things, but
that is, for me, that's my biggest struggle. Like, how do I want to support them biblically, but how do I support when I don't really know what's really going on? And I don't want to be duped either way. So Israel is a difficult question, and I think it's going to continue to be so, and I think it's going to increase and not decrease as we get closer to the end, for sure.
It's very complicated, which is exactly what the Bible predicted.
Yes.
Some of my runner-ups for the top stories were, for me personally, and I know for you also, maybe John MacArthur passing away.
I'm actually surprised you didn't put that in the top 5, but I guess you're...
It was number 6 on my list, so I didn't quite, it almost made it.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, that's big news.
It is big news because he's such an influential person in the church. And, I think, if you couple that together with, losing others as well, whether it's Steve Lawson falling, from grace, and you have well, not from grace. I mean, I think he's still a believer, but he fell from being able to be a pastor. His ministry, you had Vody Baucham who passed away.
Yep.
Yeah, and then you had obviously Mark MacArthur who passed away, and then further back, obviously R.C. Sproul. So, those guys that were the stalwarts of the ministry over the past, 6 decades are now passing from the scene. And so I think that's a big, at least for the church, I think that's a big change that we've seen over the past 10 years. Yeah,
James Dobson passed away, and Chuck Swindoll is stepping down as pastor, and Alistair Begg stepping down as pastor. And so, I mean, a lot of these guys who have been around a long time are all stepping back, or they're going home to be with the Lord. So interesting to see that we are living in these days where the church is so going with the flow. Whatever the world's going, the church kind of goes with it in some ways. And all these men who were kind of the stalwarts are no longer there. There's no, I mean, guys like you and other pastors are going to have to stand up and take the baton from them and go forward.
Yeah, I've said it many times. We need an army of small churches that would stand up together and fight together. The one thing that, if you think about it's just MacArthur was pastor of a big church. I mean, it still exists, but big church. And you have, I think Alistair Begg, I assume his church is rather large. Big. Chuck Swindoll, I'm sure, is a large church.
Yep.
I don't know, what in terms of, but it's interesting because I think the average church attendance is somewhere around, or membership is somewhere around 50 to 60. So we're not quite average at Grace Bible Church at this point, but we're not far away from being
we're
average.
Close.
And I don't think that people realize that because there's so many large churches that, that are so influential. And I think what we need is the church to be strengthened at a not at those, I mean, basically small churches really standing up and fighting. That's what I would want to see. And what I pray for is that a bunch of unknown pastors just really preach the gospel, and many come to know the Lord through it.
Yeah, and it's kind of sad when you see most of the progressive churches or the churches that are moving towards more of the world. They're the larger ones. The churches that are staying faithful are, like you said, 50 to 60, and some of the false churches are like 3,000. So it's just amazing.
For sure. I mean, some of the biggest churches out there are false churches. I mean, or at least they're not obedient to the gospel. And you've got what's his name up in North Carolina?
Stephen Furtick.
Stephen Furtick, yeah. Sorry, it's good.
Yeah, his church is huge.
His church is huge. You have obviously Joel Osteen has a huge church, but there's others that are, we're talking, thousands and thousands of people that go to them, and I'm praying that the Lord would just really raise up an army of small churches, and small pastors who don't have 25,000 people going to their church, but are influential in the lives of people that they have.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I always say I'd rather be at a smaller church to know everyone's name and know what's going on in their lives than just go on Sunday.
We could change our church to Cheers.
Cheers
Church, where everybody knows your name.
Oh, I could change my name to Norm then. Norm walking.
You'd make a good Norm.
Wow. Yeah. But it's interesting.
Or what's the guy on
Cliff?
Seinfeld?
Oh,
no.
George?
I'd probably be Cliff. Cliff Clavin.
Remember Cliff? He knew everything.
He knows everything.
He'd always be.
He thought he knew everything.
Yeah.
That's probably me.
Yeah. Those two are funny characters. I don't know who you're talking about in Seinfeld. Kramer? Okay. That's usually Kramer.
You'd make a good Kramer.
I'd make a good Kramer. Oh, my word. I do like, Kramer did like Kenny Rogers chicken, although I've never had it, but it looked really good.
Yeah.
Are those still around?
I don't know. I've never seen one.
I don't know. I thought maybe you in Arkansas had stopped at a Kenny Rogers or something.
I've never had Kenny Rogers. I'm kind of a KFC guy myself.
Me too. I've never seen one, but I know we have Popeyes but I've never seen a Kenny Rogers. Maybe it went out of business. That was back in the 90s when Seinfeld came out, so I don't know if it's still around. Maybe Ken can let us know. He's kind of a
Kenny Rogers isn't still around, so I don't know.
I know he did pass away, so maybe he sold it to Popeyes or something.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I never thought of that. Okay, so predictions. What's coming up in 2026? Who can you just give me what you think your first thought is about 2026 coming up? What do you think is going to happen? Anything? What do you got on your mind?
Well, I mean, in terms of what I think is going to happen in the church, I mean, I do think that there's going to continue to be a growing divide within the church over Israel. I think I've already said that, but I would definitely make that as a particular prediction that it's going to get worse before it ever gets better. And so, and I mean, again, that fits Scripture. That ultimately everybody's going to be against Israel. Israel's going to stand alone, and you can see the writing on the wall, so to speak. So I think, there is going to continue to be a growing divide that way, especially when you consider, the growing influence of America First or Christian nationalism. That's definitely, I think, it's definitely going to be a problem for the church.
Yeah, that could be a huge divide. You wonder if it's going to in the Baptist, in the Southern Baptist, will that kind of divide certain Baptist churches and from other Baptist churches? And I think denominations will actually declare they're against Israel, like you said, like maybe the Presbyterians or
that'd be interesting.
Lutherans or something will. I mean that I can see that coming. So that's a good prediction. One of mine for coming up in 2026 is AI. I'm not really going out on a limb here, but AI, artificial intelligence will begin to take over everything. And I mean everything, from fast food restaurants to everything, television, movies, everything. So,
Yeah, it's a big deal. It's a big deal. I mean, I think you're going to continue to see. I mean, it's going to start affecting. Already, like if you go to a McDonald's, there's less workers at McDonald's because you have all these different ways to order food as opposed to doing it with a human. And McDonald's is an example of that, where technology is beginning to do away with jobs. And I think AI is going to be that on steroids in terms of what's going on. And so what do you do with all these people, and what do they do if they don't have these jobs? I think you're going to start seeing it affect white collar jobs as well, like lawyers. Already you can go online and get legal advice through AI, and write up a will through AI. I mean, there's things that, contracts. I mean, there's definitely things that, I mean, now at this point, is it perfect? Probably not. I mean, would I trust it? No, but it's coming, and it's you can see the writing on the wall.
Oh, absolutely. It's not a robe. It's one of those things. And I was just researching AI, and I saw that an AI it has the power to do a quintillion calculations per second, which is 1 with 18 zeros after it. Imagine that. Imagine what it can do in 5 minutes, how many calculations it can make. So it's not something that I think should happen. I wish there was a way we could stop it. But I think, again, we look at when Satan brings things into our world, he doesn't do it to force us into it. We sort of go into it going, hey, this is a good idea. Let's do it.
It's funny you say you bring Satan into this and his influence that way. It's interesting because I wonder, I mean, there's a lot of mysteries surrounding the beginnings of AI. Like, how did it start?
Yeah.
And, they talked about how they went from reading, line to line to line to reading both directions, and how that changed, that changed AI, or changed how it processes. But, because, it's basically reading going through the internet and learning is how it's, not learning in the sense of humanity learning, but expanding the knowledge base that's within AI. And so, but how that's just, to me, it's dark. There's a dark aspect to how it actually got started. And maybe somebody, one of our listeners, maybe somebody knows more than I do in terms of how it was started, but it would not surprise me. And we've talked about this on Fresh Bread before, but it would not surprise me if demonically that was given to humanity, that it was a demonic influence that started AI, because of, ultimately, if you think about it, even if you think about the false prophet and the Antichrist, in Revelation, they're going to counterfeit, God. They're going to try to become God, and they're going to counterfeit the things that God does, similar to what happened with, when Moses and in Egypt, and the curses, and the diviners, they were able to do some of the same things, and I think that's what you're going to see going in Revelation. I think that's what you're going to see, is you're going to see this idea of being a God. And I think that's AI is getting us to that point, is what I'm ultimately getting to, is getting humanity to a point where AI is going to be a God.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you can totally see it.
Yeah.
I mean, if it can do that many, imagine right now, this is 2026, it can do 1 quadrillion, which is what, 1 and 18 zeros. Even 3 years from now, it might be able to do far more than that. And so it's just beyond our brain power to even understand that.
Yeah, right now the limitation to it is the power supply. And I do think that that's going to become a big issue going forward. Where I think we may begin to see, especially coming even this summer, you may begin to see, as more and more data centers come online, they're huge power requirement, and you may begin to see rolling brownouts or
That was one of my
blackouts.
predictions.
What's that?
That was one of my predictions. So that was
Oh,
good. I do
yeah.
think that, I do agree with you. I think that's coming this year, far more than last year.
For sure. I think we had some of it last year, and the grid is outdated and is not, it's not going to be able to supply the power. And so, we're going to begin to see different things that are out there. Musk, believes that it needs to be solar, but he doesn't think solar can. My understanding is he doesn't think that solar here on Earth will be able to do it. So it's going to take big solar arrays in space. And so we may see some of that. Nuclear is another potential route for producing power, building more nuclear power plants, which I'm not necessarily against the nuclear power plants because I think it's an efficient way to create power, and can be very safe if it's handled in the proper way.
I agree. And I think it may take, I don't know, I've heard 5 to 10 years to build some of those power plants, but maybe they can do them faster. But you're right. I think until then, there will be power shortages, outages all over, maybe even here in Florida. I don't know.
We'll see.
Got to get a generator. But here's how scary AI is, though, is that eventually, making these predictions, these calculations per second, it'll be able to predict someone's behavior before they do something. So people are going to say, hey, it's a really good idea because we can stop crime, because it'll be able to predict it's looking at your face and it's going to go, he's thinking a bad thing. So, and the police will come and arrest you before you even do the crime. I think there was a movie with somebody with that. Was it Tom Cruise or something? There was a movie about that where
that's crazy. That's crazy if it happens.
Well, but again, you can see end time stuff, right? This is exactly how it was going to go. So anyway, that was one of my other predictions. AI will begin to take over everything, and then also energy shortages. So do you have another one that you can throw out here?
Yeah, I think the growing danger of influencers on social media, especially on the right. Nick Fuentes is the one that comes to mind. Andrew Tate. These guys are toxic, and what they're preaching is not good. But it sounds good to a lot of people, and what's interesting is that they make good points in some ways, because like Andrew Tate is it's kind of this masculine man should be ruling, but he's doing it from a standpoint of basically it's without the feminine, and there's not a biblical worldview there. We would argue biblically that men have their roles and women have their roles in terms of especially the family, and so Andrew Tate's not seeing things from a family point of view, but he is recognizing that there's a problem. He's not seeing things from a biblical point of view, but he is recognizing there's a problem. And I think that's why his answers are dangerous, because there's going to be a lot of young people who are influenced in that way. Nick Fuentes is another one I mentioned just a few minutes ago, but he's another one I think is out there. But I think there's a growing number of them. And even in the church, there's people who are beginning to just say some of the same things and, in the church. And, with social media, it's easy to get a platform. It's just, open up a social media account and start talking, whether it's YouTube or whether Facebook or whatever you use. X isn't, obviously a big one for a lot of people. And, if you want a platform, you just start talking, and there's going to be people who will listen to you. And, if you say a lot of things that people want to hear, if you, tickle the ears or, gratify the flesh, you're going to get a big following. And that's what's happening. It's so much easier now to do that, with these guys. And so I think there's going to be a continued growing danger in that. And I know that's not a big prediction. Like, I'm not necessarily going out on a limb on that, but it is something that I am concerned for.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. Is one of those guys the guy that he was talking about Hitler was right, and what was wrong with Hitler?
Nick Fuentes he's a fan of Stalin. He likes Hitler as well. He's and a lot of things he says, I think he says, for
Shock.
shock, but and I think he says these things, but he even said on the Tucker interview, he's a big Stalin fan, and and he didn't back off. And what was sad is for me that Tucker didn't push him on it. So, but yeah, I think that especially young white males, and here's what's interesting is that I think that young white males have become disenchanted about America and what we're doing, because a lot of them are being cut out of opportunity, and by companies that were hiring, they're in the name of diversity and equity, they're hiring, they're not hiring white males. And so I think that people are becoming young white males are becoming disenchanted, and I think that's where they're going to start listening potentially to some of these things, some of these people that are problematic. And so as the church, we have to be a voice that is speaking biblically, so that these young guys can, find hope in scripture as opposed to hope in worldly ideology.
Yeah, I agree. I think I heard that if you're a young white male, there's not a real good chance you're going to ever go up high in the ladder. You're going to always be stuck on the bottom because they're going to take other people before you.
Well, yeah. And females are before males.
Yeah. So, and minorities are before them and
whether
are equal to them.
If you're, obviously, I say obviously, but if you're black and a female, that's, one of the highest rungs. But, obviously, and I say, again, not obviously, but there's also, people who are trans and people who are bisexual, right, and homosexual. And so, they're getting the nod before, a straight white guy, that is just wanting to be, he wants to get married and have kids. That's the bottom of the rung right now, bottom rung of the ladder.
Yeah. If you're a black trans woman, you have a 100% chance of becoming police chief or fire chief. If you're a 30-year-old white straight male, you have a 1%, maybe less chance of becoming.
Obviously chief. Some places are, like you're going to come near becoming a sheriff or whatever, or a mayor or whatever in Florida versus California, as a white male. But if you look at the entire country, it's definitely a problem. And, the biblical worldview is that we shouldn't be, there are no races. It's, right, that we are one, the human race. We're all humanity, and there are different cultures within humanity, but there are forces that want to pit the quote unquote races against one another. And, that's problematic in terms of, especially now, I think that a lot of these young white males are being, they can't buy a house. The housing prices are so expensive now that the hurdle to get into the housing market is so high that it's very difficult. We're talking people that are in their 30s, 40s, and 50s and not able to buy a house. It is certainly becoming more and more problematic.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We were hoping that would die off as Trump became president, but I don't think we're going to ever see that go away. I think that's going to continue probably for a long time.
Well, if Trump doesn't keep power, if he loses in the midterms, then you have to look forward to 2028. And when you get to 2028, the question is, would Republicans be able to keep the presidency? And I think Vance actually may be even more popular is more popular than Trump at this point, and so that's potential. But if the Democrats ever get power again, I don't know what stops them. I think that's the dark side to what Trump has done, which I'm all for a lot of the changes he's made. But I think the downside or the dark side to that is they are going to do the same thing on the other direction if another Democrat ever becomes president. So it's kind of a whipsaw. It's kind of a whipsaw effect that potentially could happen.
Yeah, I don't know what a whipsaw is, but it doesn't sound good.
Well, yeah.
Is that an Arkansas saying?
Yeah, I think so.
Here's what I heard is also, did you ever hear this? This plan that Trump was devising was that after he's done, then Vance becomes president. Vance chooses Charlie Kirk as his vice president. Vance serves for 8 years, and then Charlie Kirk runs and he becomes president for 8 years. So for the next 16, I guess 20 years, counting Trump's 4 years, that would be controlled by the mega guys but some people are saying that's why Charlie Kirk was taken out and all this stuff. You always get these conspiracy theories. So, but that would have been interesting, a 20-year run of conservative Republican leadership. But I always say, watch out for AOC and all these other, like this woman becoming president, because then that we are in the end times and that God has said, okay, we'll see you later, United States. You get what you pay for. Okay, so we got to wrap this up. This is what we think's coming in 2026. I got a couple things to throw out here just to see. Watch out for these things. Will USA take over Venezuela? Yes or no? What do you think?
I don't know. I don't think that we would do that, but why would we? But obviously we're dealing with the drug issue that's coming out of Venezuela. And the drug boats and things like that. I don't think that's going to happen, but I mean it could, I guess.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those confrontational things that just sprung up between USA and Venezuela. We'll see if it continues.
I'm probably the quickest way for something to happen is for me to say it won't happen. So
well, there you go. So say it won't happen. How about will China take over Taiwan in 2026?
That's very possible. That seems to be a threat that's ever looming, and I don't honestly know what stopped them. I don't know how we could stop. I don't think we would be able to stop them if they wanted to take it over. So why haven't they already done it? But yeah, I think that's something that we very well could see in 2026.
Will we make first contact with a UFO in 2026, or do we have to wait until 2027?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, if those longtime listeners know that my point of view, and I think you agree, is that UFOs may be a thing, but it's probably, if there are UFOs, it's just a demon. It's demonic, and so which makes sense biblically that it would be that way. So, will we make contact? I think we already have. If it's demons, I think we've already made contact. So
absolutely, but I think it'll be more of a show. Like there'll be this giant spacecraft, and then they'll come down, and But like you said, it's all dynamic. It's an illusion to fool us into thinking that we're not alone, and that evolution is true, and that
if you think, God is going to send a diluting influence. So
absolutely,
so it's going to be easy for people to be duped, and I think that would be one way to dupe people.
I agree. And my last one here is watch for more Turtle Island terrorist attacks. If you don't know what that is, look it up because it's scary. I think that's coming to our country more. These Turtle Island goofballs.
I think I heard you talking about it the other day.
They're these. It's almost like I think they're college students or something like that, where they want to give Palestine back to the Palestinians and take out Israel, but they also want to give back the United States to the Native Americans. They want us out of here. So I don't know how they're going to transport us and do that, but they had this big thing planned for New Year's Eve, and in LA they caught them. They foiled their plans, but we'll see. Just listen for that name, Turtle Island terrorist. See if that pops up in 2026.
Yeah, very well could be. I just pulled it up on I just Google researched it, and I see some of what you're talking about.
Yeah. So anyway, that's all I got for you. 2026.
That's all I got for you.
Any last closing?
I do think that we've talked a lot about a lot of downers, so to speak, but it's interesting. One of our listeners sent a article this morning of the 5 things you can bank on. And so as we close, I would like to give those 5 things because I think they're important that we can actually bank on. We can know that this is what's going to happen.
Yes.
Number 1, God will still be sovereign.
There you go.
Number 2, God's truth won't change.
Amen.
Number 3, human institutions will continue to disappoint us.
Preach it.
Number 4, faithfulness will matter more than influence.
Amen.
And number 5, the gospel will still be sufficient for sinners, sufferers, and skeptics alike.
Hallelujah.
So I do think that those are the things that we can count on. This guy's name is Peter Heck, who wrote this article, and he says 5 things I can guarantee will happen in 2026. So
yeah,
there you are.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good way to end it, because it is kind of dark, and even though we are living in these, we believe they're the last days. We're getting close, and things are becoming a little bit like just crazy. Common sense is gone, and it's just all this weird stuff. But we can count on God. We can trust God. He's still sovereign. He's still on his throne, and everything's going exactly as he has planned it, and he'll take care of his own.
Yeah, none of this is taking him by surprise.
No. He knows the Turtle Island fruitcakes. He knows all of that.
Yes.
Well, Happy New Year.
Speaking of fruitcake.
Oh, you got one?
Isn't that what you're supposed to have for New Year's?
I think Christmas.
Oh, is it Christmas? Oh, okay. Well, what about black eyed peas?
Boy, I don't know. That might be during a power outage. You have that.
No, I think black eyed peas is a scene, and I'm 100% certain that black eyed peas is a New Year's thing, but I think it may be in the South.
What did you guys always have for New Year's Day? Do you remember?
Oh, I think we probably more cooked out, grilled is kind of what we did when I was young.
I think we always had ham because ham was on sale.
Oh,
after Christmas.
Yeah, we have turkey for Thanksgiving. We have ham for Christmas, and if we were to do anything on New Year, it would be more of a grill thing.
Okay, that sounds good though.
Yeah, come on over.
All right, I'm on my way.
All right.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
2026. You've been listening to Fresh Bread, a podcast ministry of Grace Bible Church Gainesville. For more information, go to gracegainesville.org. And thanks for listening.